What if the hardest part of your day isn't work, but trying to fall asleep? What if your body is exhausted, but your thoughts refuse to rest? Why does night, the time meant for peace, sometimes feel the most restless? Take a breath. Let's slow everything down together. So settle deeper into your pillow. Let each word carry you backward through 25 centuries, feeling the transformation from mythology to medicine, from temple to prescription counter. There's nothing to do, nothing to remember. Just the gentle story of how a serpent's coil around a wooden staff became humanity's universal symbol of healing. Picture ancient Greece in the 5th century, before the Common Era. The landscape is dotted with white marble temples gleaming under the Mediterranean sun, their columns casting long shadows across stone courtyards. Among these sacred places, some are different from the rest. These are the Asclepiae, temples dedicated not to Zeus or Athena, but to Asclepius, the god of healing and medicine. Asclepius was the son of Apollo, the god of light, music, and prophecy, but also of healing and plague. His mother, according to legend, was the mortal woman Coronis. Though she died while pregnant, Apollo saved the unborn child, entrusting him to Chiron, the wise centaur who lived on Mount Pelion. Chiron, known for his knowledge of herbs and healing arts, taught the young Asclepius everything: how to identify medicinal plants, how to set broken bones, how to treat wounds and fevers, how to ease suffering. Asclepius became so skilled that he could not only heal the sick, but, according to myth, raise the dead. This power eventually led to his downfall. Zeus struck him down with a thunderbolt, fearing that mortals gaining immortality would upset the natural order. But Apollo pleaded for his son, and Zeus relented, placing Asclepius among the stars and allowing his worship to continue on earth. Temples dedicated to Asclepius sprang up throughout the Greek world. The most famous was at Epidaurus, but there were hundreds of others. On the island of Kos, birthplace of Hippocrates, at Pergamon, at Corinth, scattered across the Mediterranean. These weren't just places of worship, they were healing sanctuaries, ancient hospitals where the sick came seeking cures. Walk with me through one of these temples. The air is cooler inside, a relief from the Greek sun. Your footsteps echo on polished marble floors. The smell of incense, frankincense perhaps, or myrrh, drifts through the columned halls. Somewhere you hear the murmur of prayers, the quiet conversations of priests and suppliants, and then you see them, the snakes. Sacred snakes lived in every temple of Asclepius. Not venomous serpents, but Elaphe longissima, the Aesculapian snake, a species of rat snake still found in parts of Europe. These snakes were allowed to move freely through the temple grounds, gliding across the cool stone floors, coiling around columns, sometimes approaching the sick who came seeking healing. Why snakes? Ancient Greeks saw profound symbolism in serpents. Snakes shed their skin, emerging renewed, seemingly reborn. This cycle of death and regeneration made them perfect symbols of healing and transformation. They moved between the surface world and underground burrows, bridging the realm of the living and the dead, perfectly suited to a god who himself had been raised from mortality to divinity. The sick who came to these temples underwent a ritual called incubation. They would bathe, make offerings, and then sleep in a special chamber called the abaton. During the night, Asclepius himself, or his sacred snakes, would visit them in dreams, either healing them directly or revealing the treatment they needed. Many inscriptions survive describing these miraculous cures, testimonials carved in stone by grateful patients who credited the god with their recovery. At the heart of Asclepius's iconography was his staff, a simple wooden rod roughly the height of a man, smooth and worn from years of handling. Picture this staff in your imagination. It's made of wood, perhaps ash or cypress, something strong and flexible. The surface has been polished by countless hands, giving it a sheen that catches the light. It's cool to the touch when you first grasp it, the wood having absorbed the temple's perpetual coolness, but it warms slowly in your palm. And coiled around this staff, from base to top, is a single serpent. Not two snakes, as you might see on the caduceus. That's a different symbol belonging to Hermes, the messenger god, often confused with Asclepius's rod. The rod of Asclepius features just one snake, winding its way upward in graceful spirals. Feel the presence of that snake in your mind. Its scales are smooth, overlapping like tiny roof tiles, cool and dry, not slimy as people often imagine. The snake's body creates a rhythm as it coils, up and around, following the staff's length. Its head might rest at the top, tongue flicking out to taste the air, or perhaps the snake has wrapped itself so tightly that head and tail are indistinguishable, creating an endless loop of healing symbolism. In the temples, priests would sometimes use actual snakes in healing rituals. A sick person might lie on a marble bench, eyes closed, breathing slowly, trying to calm their racing heart, their anxious mind, and then they would feel it, the dry, cool touch of scales against skin, a snake moving slowly across their arm or leg. The sensation would be both alarming and strangely soothing. The rhythmic movement, the gentle weight, the knowledge that this was a sacred creature, an embodiment of the healing god's power. Listen to the sound of a snake moving across stone. It's subtle, a soft whisper, scales sliding over marble, almost like silk being drawn across a smooth surface. In the temple's quiet, this sound would be distinctly audible, a reminder of the divine presence, of nature's power to heal and renew. The wooden staff itself served practical purposes too. Physicians in ancient Greece were travelers, moving from city to city, offering their services. The staff was a walking stick, support for long journeys on foot across mountainous terrain. But it was also a symbol of authority, a sign that the bearer possessed knowledge of healing arts, that he was a follower of Asclepius, dedicated to the relief of suffering. The combination of staff and serpent created a visual symbol that was simple yet profound. The staff represented support, stability, the foundation of the healing arts. The serpent represented transformation, renewal, the mysterious power of nature to restore health. Together, they formed an icon that would endure for millennia. As centuries passed and the classical world gave way to new eras, the worship of Asclepius faded. The Roman Empire adopted the god, they called him Aesculapius, and built temples to him, including a famous one on Tiber Island in Rome. But with the rise of Christianity, pagan gods were abandoned, their temples repurposed or destroyed, their rituals forgotten. Yet the symbol survived. Asclepius's rod, That simple image of staff and serpent persisted through the Dark Ages, carried forward in medical manuscripts, preserved in the collective memory of those who practiced healing arts. Medieval monks, who were often the only literate members of society and who maintained medical knowledge, copied ancient Greek and Roman texts. In these manuscripts, illustrations of Asclepius's rod appeared, a link to the classical tradition of healing. The Renaissance brought renewed interest in classical learning. Scholars rediscovered ancient Greek texts, including the medical writings of Hippocrates and Galen. They studied the old healing traditions, and with them, the symbolism of Asclepius. The rod and serpent began appearing again as a medical emblem adopted by physicians who saw themselves as inheritors of that ancient tradition. By the 18th and 19th centuries, as medicine began to transform from art to science, as hospitals replaced temples and pharmaceuticals replaced prayers, the rod of Asclepius became increasingly common as a symbol for medical organizations. It appeared on medical school seals, on the insignia of military medical corps, on the logos of pharmaceutical companies. In 1947, the World Health Organization chose the rod of Asclepius as the basis for its symbol, combining it with a globe and laurel branches. This decision cemented the rod's status as the universal emblem of healthcare. Today, if you see a staff with a single snake entwined around it, you immediately recognize it as related to medicine, healing, healthcare. The transformation is remarkable when you think about it. A symbol that began in Greek temples, where sick people slept hoping for divine visions, where sacred snakes glided across marble floors, where healing was considered the domain of gods. This same symbol now marks your local pharmacy, your doctor's office, your hospital's emergency room. The divine has become practical. The miraculous has become mundane. Yet the symbol endures, carrying whispers of its ancient origins. Walk down any street in almost any city in the world, and you'll likely see the symbol. In many countries, pharmacies display a green cross, sometimes animated with lights, sometimes static. Often, accompanying this cross is a simplified version of the rod of Asclepius, a staff with a snake wound around it. The green color has become standardized in many places, green being associated with nature, healing, vitality. The ubiquity of the symbol is remarkable. In France, it's the Croix Verte, the green cross. In Italy, the Farmacia displays it. In Spain, the Cruz Verde. In Greece, the country where it all began 25 centuries ago, the symbol still marks places of healing. The snake and staff have become so universal, so immediately recognizable, that they transcend language barriers. You don't need to read the words on the sign. The symbol tells you, here is where healing can be found. But something interesting has happened in this journey from temple to pharmacy. The mystery has been lost, but also gained in a different way. Ancient Greeks seeking healing went to temples not knowing if they would be cured, trusting in divine intervention, hoping for a miracle. Today, you walk into a pharmacy with a prescription written by a doctor, and you know with reasonable certainty that the medicine dispensed will treat your condition. The uncertainty has diminished. The divine has been replaced by the scientific. And yet, isn't there still a kind of miracle in modern medicine? That we can cure infections, that would have killed our ancestors, that we can manage chronic conditions that would have meant suffering or early death just a century ago, that we can ease pain, reduce inflammation, calm anxiety, help you sleep. The methods have changed, the understanding has deepened, but the fundamental purpose remains the same as it was in those Greek temples: the relief of suffering, the restoration of health, the care of the sick. The rod of Asclepius has accompanied humanity through this entire journey, from God to symbol, from temple to pharmacy, from prayer to prescription. It has witnessed the transformation of healing from divine mystery to scientific practice. And in its endurance, there's a kind of comfort. 2,500 years of continuity, a thread connecting ancient Greek priests to modern pharmacists, all dedicated to the same essential task. And now, as the first story gently comes to an end, let it drift away like a distant memory. There is nothing to hold on to. Another quiet journey is about to begin. This is a story about transformation, about how a goddess became a plant, about love and jealousy and the strange mercy of being remembered even in diminished form. It's the story of Nymph, a water nymph who lived in the realm of shadows, who loved unwisely, who spoke too boldly, and who was crushed beneath divine feet into the earth itself. But from that crushing came something unexpected. From that ending came fragrance. From that heartbreak came healing. So breathe deeply. Let your eyes close or rest gently on the ceiling above you. And imagine with me an herb garden at dusk, when the heat of day is fading, but warmth still lingers in the soil. Somewhere in that garden, among the common plants we barely notice, grows the living memory of a tragedy so old that only the scent remains to tell the tale. In the oldest stories, Nymph was a naiad, a water nymph who dwelled in the underworld. She was the daughter of Cocytus, the river of lamentation, one of the 5 rivers that wound through the realm of Hades. Imagine that world beneath the world, not the blazing torment of later Christian imagination, but the shadowed place of Greek understanding, a realm of twilight and whispers, where the dead drifted like smoke, where rivers flowed in hushed channels, and where the living almost never came. Nymph lived near Mount Mintha in Elis, though the geography of the underworld followed different rules than the geography of the surface. She was beautiful, as all nymphs were said to be. Beauty was not vanity for the nymphs, but simply their nature, the way water is wet or fire is warm. She had the kind of loveliness that came from dwelling near moving water, from being made of the same essence as clear streams and deep springs. And she caught the eye of Hades himself, the god of the underworld, that gloomy king who ruled over the dead with neither cruelty nor kindness, but with the immovable certainty of final things. Hades, who rarely smiled. Hades, who knew that all things eventually came to his kingdom, that patience was his greatest ally. Hades fell in love with the river nymph, or something close to love. They became lovers, and for a time, Nymph knew what it was to be cherished by a god. But then came Persephone, stolen from the upper world, carried down through a crack in the earth while gathering flowers, the daughter of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, young and unwilling, brought to be Hades' queen. The marriage was arranged by Zeus himself, though Persephone's mother would grieve so deeply that all growing things would wither until a compromise was reached. Persephone would spend part of each year in the underworld, part on the surface. But she would be queen nonetheless. And queens do not share. Here the stories diverge. Some say Nymph boasted of her beauty, claiming she was lovelier than Persephone, that Hades would return to her and cast the new queen aside. Some say she tried to seduce Hades even after his marriage, unable to let go of what she had known. Some say Persephone simply found them together and acted in rage. And some say it was not Persephone at all, but Demeter, the mother goddess, who took offense at Nymph's presumption. What all versions agree on is the ending. Nymph was confronted. Whether by the young queen or the ancient mother, divine power descended upon her, and she was trampled, stepped on with all the force a goddess could muster, ground into the earth, crushed like grain on a threshing floor, her form broken and scattered into the soil. But something happened in that crushing. Instead of simply ceasing to exist, instead of joining the countless shades of the dead, Nymph transformed. From the place where she was trampled, a plant sprang up, low to the ground, as if still pressed down by that divine foot. Hardy and persistent, spreading through underground runners, almost impossible to kill. And when anyone stepped on it, when anyone crushed its leaves, it released the most extraordinary scent. Some stories say Hades did this, unable to undo what Persephone or Demeter had done, but able to ensure that Nymph would be remembered, that her beauty would persist, translated into fragrance, that she would delight people still in this new form. Others say the transformation simply happened, that this was the nature of divine violence against lesser beings. What was destroyed was also preserved. What was ended was also transformed. To understand Nymph's story, you must understand the plant she became. Reach out in your imagination and pluck a single leaf of mint. It's small, roughly oval, no bigger than your thumbnail. The edges are serrated, tiny teeth running along each side. The surface is slightly fuzzy, covered in microscopic hairs. The color is that particular shade of green that suggests vitality, health, the verdant force of growing things. Now, between your fingers, crush the leaf gently, bruise it, break the tiny cells that make up its structure. Immediately, almost violently, the scent releases. It floods your senses, sharp, clean, green, impossibly refreshing. It's a smell that seems to open up space in your head, clearing cobwebs, pushing back fog. Your breathing deepens involuntarily, pulling more of that scent into your lungs. The sensation is cooling, though the leaf itself is not cold. This is the magic of menthol, the compound that makes mint mint. When it touches the receptors in your nose, in your mouth, on your skin, it triggers the same nerves that respond to cold. Your brain receives the signal, cold. But there is no drop in temperature, just the illusion of it, the ghost of winter in the middle of summer. Ancient Greeks understood this quality, though they had no word for menthol, no scientific understanding of volatile oils and chemical compounds. They knew only that crushing mint leaves produced a sensation unlike any other plant, that it seemed to carry within it some essence of freshness, some captured purity, that even the smallest amount could transform the air around it. The scent doesn't linger heavily like perfume. It's too light for that, too volatile. The molecules evaporate quickly, carried away on the slightest breeze. But while it lasts, it commands attention. It's the olfactory equivalent of a bell's clear ring, cutting through all other smells with its singular note. If you were to eat the leaf, the sensation would intensify. The coolant would spread across your tongue, the roof of your mouth, down your throat. Not numbing exactly, but creating that strange pseudo-cold that makes you want to breathe deeply, to pull air across the affected surfaces to intensify the effect. Your saliva production would increase slightly. The taste would be both sweet and sharp, herbal but not bitter, complex in ways that reward attention. This is what Nymph became. Not a rose, delicate and beautiful, but quickly fading. Not an oak, mighty and enduring, but taking centuries to grow. A humble herb, something that grows in patches by riverbanks and in cracks between garden stones. Something so common that people barely notice it until they crush it underfoot, and then they cannot help but notice. In ancient times, mint was woven into wreaths and hung in rooms to freshen stale air. It was rubbed on tables before feasts to welcome guests with its scent. It was steeped in water for washing, added to wine for flavor, chewed to sweeten breath, and crucially, importantly, it was used in funerary rites. The dead were anointed with mint or laid on beds of mint because the strong fragrance masked the smell of decay. So Nymph, the nymph of the underworld, became the plant of death rites, the herb that accompanied the dead on their final journey. Perhaps there was poetry in this, a kind of bitter appropriateness. She had lived in Hades' realm. Now she served those who traveled there. Her scent, which had once pleased a god, now eased the passage of mortals into that shadowland she knew so well. The transformation from divine being to common plant might seem like pure tragedy. To go from a naiad, an immortal spirit of water, lovely and loved by the king of the underworld himself, to something that grows wild in ditches and is casually harvested for cooking, this seems like the ultimate diminishment, the complete loss of status and significance. But perhaps that's not the whole story. Perhaps there's something else here, something gentler. Nymph, as a nymph, was bound to one place, one river in the underworld. She belonged to Cocytus, the river of wailing, and could not stray far from its banks. Her existence, though immortal, was also limited. How many people saw her? How many knew her name? She was one minor spirit among countless others, significant only in her connection to Hades. But as Nymph, she spread, through ancient Greece first, then throughout the Mediterranean world, then across continents and oceans. Every garden, every kitchen, every place where humans cultivated plants for use and pleasure, there she could grow. She became known by every farmer, every cook, every herbalist. Her name changed across languages. Nymph became Mentha, became mint. But the recognition remained. Children learned her scent before they knew her story. They would run through gardens and accidentally crush her leaves and stop, startled by that sudden coolness in the air. They would bring stems to their mothers, asking what it was, this amazing plant, and the mothers would say, mint, and they would show their children how to use it, how to appreciate it, how to honor it by making use of what it offered. In this way, Nymph became immortal in a new sense, not the immortality of a fixed spirit bound to one place forever, but the immortality of usefulness, of being woven into human life so thoroughly that to remove her would leave a gap. Every cup of tea flavored with mint, every dish of lamb dressed with mint sauce, every sweet flavored with peppermint, every garden where mint establishes itself and refuses to be eradicated. These are all acts of remembrance, though most who perform them don't know what they're remembering. The ancient Greeks certainly knew. When they used mint in their Eleusinian mysteries, in the sacred drink called kykeon that initiates consumed, they were invoking the underworld, the realm of Demeter's daughter Persephone. Mint was one of the ingredients, along with barley and water, the drink that offered visions, that promised understanding of life and death, that brought the living into contact with mysteries usually reserved for the dead. And when they scattered mint in their temples, when they wore it in wreaths at festivals, when they brought it as offerings to shrines, they were continuing a relationship with the divine that stretched back to Minth's original form. The plant was not separate from the goddess. It was the goddess transformed but still present, still offering her gifts. This understanding faded over centuries. The Christians came and the old gods retreated into mythology, from belief into story. The reasons for using mint in certain ways were forgotten even as the practices continued. But the plant remained, growing in monastery gardens and peasant plots, crossing oceans with colonists, adapting to new climates and new uses. Today, mint grows on every inhabited continent, in tended gardens and wild spaces, in pots on apartment windowsills, and in vast commercial fields. Some varieties are cultivated for specific qualities. Peppermint for its strong menthol, spearmint for its sweeter flavor, chocolate mint for its subtle cacao notes. But all of them carry that same essential mintness, that sharp, clean, cooling signature, and all of them, whether anyone remembers or not, carry within their cells the story of a nymph who loved a god, who spoke too boldly, who was crushed into the earth, and who rose again in a form that would outlast empires. There is a particular peace in gardens where mint grows unchecked, not the manicured calm of formal landscapes, but something wilder, more generous. Mint is not a tidy plant. It spreads through underground rhizomes, sending up new shoots wherever it can find purchase. Leave it alone for a season and it will double its territory. Leave it alone for a year and it will have colonized whole beds, crowding out less aggressive plants, claiming ground with the quiet insistence of water, wearing away stone. Gardeners often curse this quality. They plant mint in containers to contain its spread. They sink bottomless buckets into the ground and plant the mint inside, trying to limit its ambitions. They wage ongoing battles against its expansion, pulling up runners, cutting back growth, establishing borders it immediately ignores. But there's something admirable in this persistence, isn't there? Minthe was trampled, ground into the earth with divine force, transformed against her will, and she responded by becoming unkillable, by spreading everywhere, by refusing to be limited or contained, by making herself so useful, so valuable, that humans would carry her to every corner of the globe and give her space to grow. On a warm evening, walk through a garden where mint has established itself. The low angle of the sun makes the leaves glow. The heat of the day has drawn out the volatile oils, and even without crushing the leaves, you can smell them. That clean green scent hanging in the air like an invitation, like a memory, like something you've always known but can't quite name. Bees visit the small flowers, modest blooms in white or pale purple that appear in late summer. Butterflies sometimes rest on the leaves, The plant asks for very little: some water, some sun, some soil to sink roots into, and in return offers freely. Harvest it and it grows back. Cut it to the ground and it returns. Forget about it entirely and it thrives anyway, patient and persistent. There is comfort in this. In a world where so much is fragile, where beauty is often fleeting, where one harsh word or careless action can shatter irreparable things, here is something that endures. Here is something that transforms destruction into proliferation, that answers crushing with spreading, that meets violence with resilience. The ancient heartbreak is still there, of course. The story hasn't changed. Nymph loved, Nymph lost, Nymph was destroyed. That moment of divine anger, of jealousy turning to action, of a lesser being ground beneath the feet of greater power, that moment is frozen in every telling of the tale. The tragedy is complete, but the tragedy is also incomplete, because Minta is still here. Not as she was, but here nonetheless. Her scent rises from gardens on warm evenings. Her flavor enhances food and drink. Her presence marks the change of seasons, dying back in winter, returning in spring. She participates still in the cycle of growth and rest, death and renewal that her transformation linked her to forever. And perhaps there is a kind of peace in that. Not the peace of justice served or wrongs righted, because the old myth knows nothing of such satisfactions, but the peace of continuance, of survival in changed form, of finding purpose in what remains after everything you thought you were has been taken away. As that scene slowly fades into the night, allow your mind to remain soft and untroubled. A new story is already forming, calm and weightless. Just listen, just relax. In the ancient Roman understanding of the world, Ceres stood apart from the quarrelsome gods of Olympus. She did not scheme or seduce or wage war. She simply gave. Her domain was the earth itself, or rather, what the earth could produce when properly tended: grain crops, fertility, the tender green shoots pushing up through soil in spring, the heavy heads of wheat bending under their own abundance in late summer, the cycle of planting and harvest that made civilization possible. The Romans knew her as the daughter of Saturn and Ops, sister to Jupiter himself, king of gods. But unlike her brother with his thunder and his affairs, Ceres concerned herself with quieter matters: the yoking of oxen, the proper time to sow, the protection of young seeds vulnerable in the ground, the nourishment of growing plants, and finally, the harvest, when all that patient care transformed into food, into life, into another year of survival. She was credited with the discovery of spelt wheat, that ancient grain that sustained the Mediterranean world for millennia. Before Ceres taught humanity to cultivate grain, the story said people wandered and subsisted on acorns, living like animals without law or settlement. But the goddess showed them how to break the earth with a plow, how to scatter seed in straight furrows, how to wait through winter for spring's green promise, how to harvest and thresh and winnow and store. She gave them agriculture, and with agriculture came everything else: settled communities, the accumulation of surplus, the leisure that allows for art and philosophy and all the things that make us human. Her festivals mark the agricultural year. In January, before the sowing, Romans offered her spelt wheat and a pregnant sow, asking for her blessing on the seeds about to go into the ground. In April came the cerealia, her 7-day festival when games were held, and her name was celebrated throughout the city. At harvest time, she received the first fruits, the acknowledgement that all this abundance came through her grace, her gift, her continued care. She was depicted as a mature woman, matronly and dignified, often crowned with wheat ears, not young and beautiful in the way Venus was, but beautiful in a different way. The beauty of competence, of reliability, of a mother who would never let her children starve. In her hands, she might carry a sickle for harvest, or sheaves of grain, or the cornucopia overflowing with the earth's bounty. Sometimes she sat in a chariot drawn by serpents or dragons, creatures of the earth, chthonic and ancient. The name itself, Ceres, comes from an ancient root meaning to grow, the same root that gives us create and crescent and increase. She was growth personified, the force that takes a tiny seed and transforms it into a plant, into grain, into bread, into human life and energy and continuation. She was the answer to the fundamental question all agricultural peoples must ask: will there be enough? And her answer, when properly honored, was yes, there will be enough. The earth will provide. You will be fed. Fast forward 2,000 years. You stand in your kitchen in the morning, still half asleep, and you reach into the cupboard for a box of cereal. The word is so familiar, you've probably never thought about where it comes from. Cereal, from the Latin cerealis, meaning of Ceres, of the goddess. The breakfast food is named for her, carrying her name into homes that have never heard her story, into mornings that have forgotten her entirely. You tilt the box over a bowl. The grains tumble out. Listen to that sound, the dry rattle of processed grain hitting ceramic. It's a small sound, modest, easily overlooked, but there's something satisfying in it, something that speaks to abundance. The sound says, there is enough. The sound says, you will be fed. The sound says, the harvest was good. Each piece of cereal, whether it's a flake of corn or a wheat square or an oat circle, began as a seed, planted in soil, watered by rain or irrigation, grown under sun, harvested by combines that move through fields like giant insects, separating grain from chaff in one efficient motion, transported to mills, processed, shaped, toasted, packaged, shipped to stores, purchased, brought home, and now it falls into your bowl, and you don't think about any of that. You just pour. The etymology alone is a kind of prayer, if you think about it. Every time someone says cereal, they invoke Ceres, whether they know it or not. Her name persists in a word that children learn young, that appears on grocery lists, that represents one of the most common breakfast foods in much of the world. The goddess of grain became the word for grain products. Her identity and her gift merge so completely that you cannot separate them. In 1832, when English speakers first started using cereal to describe grain plants, they were borrowing from French, which borrowed from Latin, reaching back to that ancient root. Originally, an adjective, cerealis, of grain, it became a noun, the things themselves, the grasses cultivated for food. And then, in 1899 in American English, it took on its modern meaning. Breakfast food made from processed grain. So, when you pour cereal into a bowl, you participate in something ancient dressed in modern clothes. The grain is still grain, even if it's been puffed and sweetened and shaped into loops. The act of eating it is still the act of being sustained by what the earth produces. And somewhere in that ordinary morning moment, Ceres is still present, still given, still ensuring that there is enough. The sound continues, the slight increase in weight as the bowl fills, the visual of the pile growing, grain on grain, piece on piece. Then you add milk, and the sound changes. No longer the dry rattle, but a softer landing, cushioned. The cereal floats, then slowly begins to absorb moisture, to soften, to become something edible. You lift your spoon, you eat, you are nourished. The ritual is complete. To understand Ceres fully, you must see what she saw. Imagine standing at the edge of a wheat field in late summer. The heads are heavy with grain, bending slightly under their own weight. The whole field moves in the breeze, waves of gold flowing across the landscape like water, like sunlight made solid. The color is extraordinary. Not the harsh yellow of artificial things, but the warm, complex gold of something sun-ripened. Old gold, honey gold, the color of afternoon light, filtered through amber. This is what abundance looks like. Row after row after row of plants, each one producing dozens of seeds, each seed capable of becoming another plant. The mathematics of multiplication made visible. One seed planted becomes a plant that produces 50 seeds. Plant those 50, get 2,500. Plant those, get 125,000. The exponential growth that makes agriculture miraculous, that allows one farmer to feed many people, that creates surplus and civilization and all that follows. The wheat whispers as it moves. The dry stalks and leaves rubbing against each other create a sound like distant conversation, like the earth speaking in its own language. If you walk into the field, the plants rise taller than your knees, perhaps as high as your waist. The heads brush against your hands. You can pluck one, rub it between your palms, separate the grain from the chaff with your breath. The kernels that remain are hard, compact, pale gold. Each one is a promise. Grind it to flour, mix with water, bake it, and it becomes bread. The most basic food, the staff of life. Vincent van Gogh painted wheat fields obsessively in his last years, trying to capture this light, this color, this feeling. He wrote about working quickly, like the reaper who labors under the blazing sun. Old gold yellow, he called it. Landscapes done in a hurry, trying to fix the exact quality of light before it changed. He understood something essential about wheat fields. They represent the fundamental transaction between humanity and the earth. We care for the soil, plant the seeds, tend the growing plants, and in return, the earth feeds us. It is cooperation. It is mutual sustenance. It is sacred. In ancient times, to see a field like this meant survival. It meant your family would eat through the winter. It meant you could pay your debts, make your offerings to the gods, perhaps have something left over to trade for other necessities. A failed harvest was catastrophe. A good harvest was deliverance. The wheat field was not just agriculture, it was life or death rendered visible, growing in rows under the sun. The Romans understood this. When they made offerings to Ceres, they acknowledged the truth. We do not control this. We can do everything right. Plow at the proper time, plant good seed, weed and water and pray, and still the crop can fail. Disease, drought, insects, birds, 1,000 things can go wrong. But when it went right, when the field turned gold and the heads grew heavy and the harvest came in abundant, That was Ceres's doing. That was her gift, freely given, sustaining another generation. There is a Latin phrase, fruges consumere nati, which translates roughly as born merely to consume the fruits of the earth. The poet Horace used it disparagingly, implying people who take without contributing. But turn it around, and there's something beautiful there. We are born to be fed by the earth. It is not a luxury or an accident. It is what the earth does. It produces, it gives, it sustains. Ceres embodied this principle. Her very nature was nourishment, and the rituals surrounding her were rituals of acknowledgement. When Romans brought the first fruits of the harvest to her temple, they were not paying a tax or appeasing an angry deity. They were saying thank you. They were recognizing the relationship. You give, we receive. We tend, you bless. It is partnership. Those temple offerings have mostly disappeared, of course. The temples themselves are ruins, their roofs fallen, their altars cold. The formal priesthoods are gone. The festivals are no longer celebrated. But the principle persists. We still set aside the first and best. Maybe not in temples anymore, but in other ways. The special meal for holidays, the good bread saved for guests, the care we take with food when we pay attention to it. And every morning, when you pour cereal into a bowl, you participate in an echo of those ancient offerings. The grain that was once carried to altars now comes to you directly, packaged and processed and available at the grocery store. But it's still grain, still the gift of the earth, still the substance that connects you to thousands of years of humans eating wheat and barley and oats, being sustained by grass seeds cultivated and transformed into staple foods. There's a meditation in this simple act, if you allow it. The weight of the cereal box in your hand, the sound of grain falling, the sight of the bowl filling, the addition of milk, the lifting of the spoon. Each step is ordinary, unremarkable, repeated millions of times every morning around the world. But each step is also miraculous if you trace it back far enough. The milk from cows who ate grass, the grain from plants who captured sunlight and turned it into starch and protein, the bowl made from clay dug from earth, the spoon from metal mined from the ground. Everything comes from the earth, ultimately. Everything is Ceres's gift, ultimately. The Romans called her Ceres Mater, Ceres the Mother, and maternal is the right word for what the earth does. It doesn't produce food because we deserve it, or because we're clever, or because we work hard, though all those things help. It produces because that is its nature. Seeds grow, plants produce, the harvest comes, and we, like children at a mother's table, are fed. We are sustained. We are blessed with enough. In our modern world, where food comes from stores and the connection to agriculture is distant for many people, it's easy to forget this fundamental dependence. Easy to think of food as a commodity, something we purchase rather than something we receive. But the truth remains unchanged from ancient Rome to today. We are fed by the earth. We consume what it produces. We exist because of this ongoing gift. Ceres's name in our language, cereal, is a small reminder, a thread connecting breakfast to temple sacrifice, morning routine to ancient ritual, the ordinary to the sacred. Every time you eat grain, you participate in something older than nations, older than writing, older than cities. You join the long line of humans who learned to cultivate seeds, who domesticated grasses into wheat and barley and corn, who built civilizations on the foundation of reliable harvests. And somewhere in that, whether you acknowledge it or not, is the simple blessing of being fed, the profound gift of enough. The grace of a goddess whose name means growth, whose gifts sustain us still, whose presence persists in every grain of wheat, every bowl of cereal, every loaf of bread that ever fed anyone, anywhere, across all the long millennia of human hunger and human sustenance. And as we leave that dream behind, feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort and stillness. The night continues, carrying you effortlessly forward. Another gentle story awaits you. In the oldest stories, long before written words, there existed a bird that never truly died. The Greeks called it the phoenix, a name meaning reddish-purple, the color of its magnificent plumage. But the legend began earlier still, in ancient Egypt, where they spoke of the Bennu bird, a heron-like creature associated with Ra, the sun god, and with the daily miracle of sunrise, death transformed into renewed light. The phoenix, as the story crystallized over centuries, lived for 500 years. Some accounts say longer, 1,000 years or even more. But eventually, no matter how long, the bird would feel the weight of its years. Its wings would tire. The brilliant light that emanated from its feathers would begin to dim, and it would know, with the certainty that immortal creatures possess, that the time had come for transformation. When that moment arrived, the phoenix would leave its home in Arabia and begin a long journey westward. It flew across deserts and mountains, over seas and valleys, carrying with it a sacred purpose. Along the way, it stopped to gather materials, not common twigs or dried grass, but the rarest, most aromatic substances the earth produced. Frankincense, precious resin that wept from trees in drops of golden tears. Myrrh, another resin, bitter and fragrant, used in burial rites and temple offerings. Cassia, an ancient relative of cinnamon, and cinnamon itself, true cinnamon, cinnamon bark, the most prized of all. The bird carried these materials to Heliopolis, the city of the sun in Egypt, where a great temple to Ra stood gleaming white in the desert light. There, atop the temple or on a tall palm tree nearby, accounts vary, the phoenix built its nest. Not a simple nest of sticks, but a funeral pyre of sacred spices, layer upon layer of aromatic wood. Cinnamon twigs arranged with infinite care, the whole structure perfumed with resins, fragrant and holy, fit for an immortal's ending. When the nest was complete, the phoenix settled into it, resting among the spices it had gathered. It lifted its head toward the sun and sang. The song was said to be so beautiful that even the sun paused to listen. That time itself held its breath. And then, as the sun's rays focused on the nest, flame erupted. The spices caught fire. The phoenix burned in a conflagration of cinnamon smoke and frankincense, myrrh, and cassia. Its body consumed in fragrant flames that rose toward heaven like an offering. For 3 days, the pyre burned. 3 days of smoke carrying the scent of cinnamon across the city, across the desert, across the boundary between mortal and divine. And then, from the ashes, something stirred. A small bird, newly formed, wet and crumpled like all newborn things. But this was no ordinary chick. This was the phoenix reborn, the same bird yet new, ready to live another 500 years. The young phoenix, once it had grown strong enough, would gather the ashes of its former self. Some stories say it placed them in an egg of myrrh and carry them as an offering to the temple altar. Then it would fly back to Arabia, to paradise, to begin its life cycle again. Death and rebirth, endless as sunrise, eternal as the turning seasons. And central to this transformation, essential to the sacred nest that made rebirth possible, was cinnamon, the spice of the phoenix, the fragrance of immortality. To understand why the phoenix chose cinnamon, you must understand the scent itself. Close your eyes and imagine. Someone opens a jar of ground cinnamon in a kitchen. Immediately, before they've even poured any out, the aroma begins to spread. Warm, sweet, spicy, but not harsh. There's something fundamentally comforting about it. Something that makes you breathe deeper, that makes you want to draw it further into your lungs. The compound responsible is cinnamaldehyde, a molecule that makes up nearly 90% of cinnamon bark's essential oil. When it enters your nose, it binds strongly to olfactory receptors, triggering a cascade of signals to your brain. The brain interprets these signals as warmth, as sweetness, as something simultaneously familiar and exotic. It's a smell that seems to activate memory, even if you've never smelled cinnamon before. Some deep ancestral memory of warmth and safety and abundance. The aroma is complex, layered. At first, there's the sweet spiciness, the obvious note that everyone recognizes as cinnamon. But underneath that, if you pay attention, there are other things. A slight woodiness, earthy and grounding, a hint of something almost floral, delicate and fleeting, a dry, powdery quality that appears in the lingering tail of the scent after the initial impact has faded. Fresh cinnamon, especially the bark rather than the powder, is extraordinarily potent. When you open a container of cinnamon sticks, the smell rushes out like something alive, filling the room before you've even lifted the container to your nose. It's diffusive, spreading quickly through air, announcing its presence. And it's tenacious, clinging to your hands if you touch it, persisting in the air long after the source has been put away. Ancient peoples understood this power. When the phoenix built its nest of cinnamon, the fragrance would have been overwhelming. Imagine hundreds of cinnamon twigs piled together, their oils released by sun and heat, the air thick with that sweet, spicy scent. It would have been intoxicating, transformative, an atmosphere that belonged more to the divine realm than the earthly one. Cinnamon was rare in the ancient Mediterranean world, brought from distant lands by traders who kept their sources secret to maintain high prices. It was worth more than gold by weight. To burn it, to use it as fuel for a funeral pyre, would have been an act of incredible extravagance. Only something truly sacred, only the rebirth of an immortal bird, could justify such expenditure. The smoke from burning cinnamon carries the scent even more powerfully. As the essential oils volatilize in flame, they release their full aromatic potential. The smell becomes richer, deeper, more complex. It fills not just a room, but an entire area drifting on the wind, marking the event as something extraordinary. When the phoenix burned, the scent of cinnamon would have announced the transformation to everyone within miles. Something holy is happening here. Something is being reborn. Today, we've domesticated that scent. We sprinkle cinnamon on toast. We stir it into coffee. We burn cinnamon-scented candles and use cinnamon air fresheners. It's so common, we barely notice it. But close your eyes and really breathe it in sometime, and you might catch an echo of why the ancients considered it worthy of an immortal bird's final nest. There's still something in that aroma that speaks of transformation, of comfort, of renewal. But cinnamon is more than just scent. It's a physical presence, a tangible thing you can hold in your hands. And in its bark form, the way the phoenix would have gathered it, it has a texture and weight that ground the mythology in something real. Pick up a cinnamon stick. They're usually sold as quills, the bark rolled up on itself in tight spirals. The outside is rough, slightly bumpy, ranging in color from light tan to reddish brown. It looks like bark because it is bark. The inner bark of cinnamon trees, carefully harvested, dried and curled by the sun. Ceylon cinnamon, the true cinnamon of Sri Lanka, forms thin, delicate quills made of many layers. You can see the layers if you look at the end, concentric circles of bark wound around and around. Cassia cinnamon, the more common variety, is thicker, coarser, usually just one or two thick layers rolled into a scroll-like shape. Hold a cinnamon stick in your hand. Feel the weight of it, slight but present. Run your fingers along the surface. It's not smooth. There's texture there, roughness, the natural irregularity of something that grew. If you press lightly, the Ceylon variety might crumble slightly. It's brittle, especially if it's been stored for a while. The cassia is harder, more resistant, requiring actual effort to break. Bring it to your nose. The scent is there even without crushing or heating, but it's gentler than the powder, more subtle. To release the full aroma, you'd need to break the bark, to crush it, to expose the essential oil cells trapped within the structure. The ancient harvesters knew this. They would pound the bark, macerate it, do whatever was necessary to free the precious oils locked inside. The texture speaks to the labor involved in harvesting cinnamon. It's not easy work. The trees must be carefully tended at the right time. Usually during the rainy season when the bark is easier to remove, workers make cuts in the bark and peel it away from the inner wood. They scrape away the outer bark, leaving only the precious inner layer. Then they leave it to dry, and as it dries, it naturally curls into the quills we recognize as cinnamon sticks. For the phoenix to gather enough cinnamon to build a nest, it would have needed armfuls of these bark pieces. Imagine the bird, magnificent and glowing, landing in groves where cinnamon grew wild, carefully selecting twigs and bark, testing each piece for quality, for fragrance, for worthiness, carrying them one by one or in bundles, flying hundreds of miles to Heliopolis, building the nest with the same care a human might build a cathedral. There's something humbling in this image. An immortal creature radiant with divine light, performing manual labor, gathering materials, building carefully, piece by piece, the texture of the bark against its beak and claws, the weight of each addition, the slow accumulation of materials until finally the nest is ready, the pyre is prepared, the transformation can begin. When you hold cinnamon in your hands today, you hold something that connects to that ancient story. The same material, the same texture, the same substance. What was once gathered by mythical birds for sacred purposes is now gathered by humans for commonplace use. But the cinnamon itself hasn't changed. It's still bark, still fragrant, still carrying within it the potential for transformation, even if that transformation is now as simple as turning plain rice pudding into something special. The journey from phoenix nest to kitchen cupboard is a journey of profound transformation in itself. Cinnamon, which once was so rare and precious that only an immortal bird's rebirth could justify burning it, is now one of the most common spices in the world. You can buy it for a few dollars at any grocery store. Children eat cinnamon toast for breakfast, unknowingly consuming the material of legends. How did this happen? Trade routes opened. European explorers sought the source of spices. The Portuguese, then the Dutch, then the British, took control of cinnamon production in Ceylon. What was once mysterious and magical became commercial and mundane. The trees were cultivated in plantations. The harvest was systematized, the price dropped, and cinnamon spread across the globe, carried not by sacred birds, but by merchant ships, planted not in temple gardens, but in commercial groves from Sri Lanka to Madagascar to Indonesia. Yet something persisted through this transformation. Cinnamon never completely lost its association with specialness, with comfort, with transformation. We don't use it in everything. It remains a spice for particular occasions, particular foods, particular moods. We use it when we want to make something feel homely, cozy, warm. We use it at holidays, in celebration, in treats that mark time as special rather than ordinary. And we use it, whether we realize it or not, as a marker of renewal. Think of the times cinnamon appears most prominently. Autumn, when the year is dying but promising to return. Winter holidays, celebrating light returning after the darkest days. Spring baking, welcoming new growth. The spice has retained its symbolic connection to cycles, to death and rebirth, to the eternal return. Perhaps this is the phoenix's final gift. Not just the story, not just the mythology, but the embedding of that mythology into daily life. Every time you smell cinnamon, you participate in a ritual of renewal. Whether you know the origin or not, the scent carries comfort because it carried comfort for millennia. It speaks of transformation because it was literally the material of transformation, the substance from which an immortal bird rose renewed. In our modern world, where so much ancient wisdom seems lost, where myths feel distant and irrelevant, cinnamon offers a tangible connection. You can hold it, you can smell it, you can taste it. And in that sensory experience, you can touch something that humans have valued for thousands of years, something that once was sacred and remains, in its own quiet way, wholly still. And as we leave that dream behind, feel yourself sinking deeper into comfort and stillness. The night continues, carrying you effortlessly forward. Another gentle story awaits you. In the oldest Greek stories, Iris was the daughter of Thaumas, the sea god, and Electra, the cloud nymph. Her parentage spoke to her nature, born of wonder and sky, belonging to the liminal spaces where elements meet. She had golden wings that shimmered in sunlight, and when she moved, she left traces of color in the air behind her. She was swift as wind, reliable as dawn, and she served one purpose above all others, carrying messages. Unlike Hermes, who served Zeus and the Olympians broadly, Iris was particularly devoted to Hera, queen of the gods. She slept beneath Hera's throne on Mount Olympus, ready at a moment's notice to fly wherever commanded. When Hera needed to send word to Earth, when she needed to intervene in mortal affairs, When she needed her will enacted across the distance between divine and human realms, she called upon Iris, and Iris flew on rainbows. This was her distinctive method of travel, her signature. While other divine messengers might run or fly through empty air, Iris created a bridge of colored light and walked upon it. Or perhaps the rainbow itself was her path, appearing wherever she needed to go. The ancient Greeks, watching rainbows arc from earth to sky after storms, saw them as roads for the goddess, temporary bridges she laid down between realms. The rainbow itself is an optical phenomenon, sunlight refracted through water droplets, separating into its component wavelengths: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. But to the Greeks, it was Iris's cloak, or Iris's body, or Iris herself made visible. The meteorological and the divine were one. Every rainbow announced her presence, suggested her passage, marked the space where heaven touched earth. Her role was essential. Gods and mortals lived in separate spheres, operating by different rules, speaking different languages. Iris translated between them. She brought divine commands down to human ears and carried human prayers up to divine attention. She was the link, the connection, the one who ensured that communication flowed across the boundary. In Homer's Iliad, she appears frequently, always in motion, always carrying messages. She flies to tell Priam he should ransom his son's body from Achilles. She relays Zeus's commands to the other gods. She moves between the Trojan battlefield and Mount Olympus, between Earth's chaos and heaven's order, bridging the gap that would otherwise keep worlds separate. She was also associated with water in an interesting way. Some stories said she used her rainbow to draw water from the sea up into the clouds, replenishing the rain. She was the link between ocean and sky, between the water below and the water above, facilitating the cycle that sustained life. Even in this, she acted as messenger, as bridge, as the one who connected what seemed separate. The Greeks didn't build temples to her. She received few sacrifices compared to other gods. Her worship was minimal, almost invisible in the historical record, but her presence in stories was constant, steady, reliable. She was not a goddess of grand myths and dramatic conflicts. She was a goddess of function, of purpose, of the simple necessity of connection. And perhaps that's why her name endured. Perhaps that's why it attached to other things that serve as bridges. The iris flower with its rainbow colors, and the iris of the eye. Sometime in the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era, a Greek physician named Rufus of Ephesus looked at the human eye and saw something remarkable. In the center was the pupil, that black opening that let in light. Surrounding it was a colored ring of muscle and tissue, intricate and beautiful, controlling the pupil's size, regulating how much light reached the inner eye. And he thought of rainbows. He thought of a goddess. He called it Iris. The name stuck. From Greek medical texts to Latin, from ancient scholarship to modern anatomy, the colored part of the eye has borne the goddess's name for nearly 2,000 years. And it's a fitting name, because the iris of the eye is itself a kind of bridge, a boundary between outer world and inner vision. Look closely at an iris, really closely, and you'll see it's not just a solid disk of color, it's a landscape. There are patterns there, structures, textures that vary from person to person with extraordinary specificity. Furrows, radiate out from the pupil like cracks in dried earth. Crypts appear as darker pockets, diamond-shaped hollows where the stromal layer has gaps. Pigmented rings circle the pupil in bands of different shades, and threading through everything are collagen fibers, creating texture and depth, making the iris three-dimensional even though it's thin as paper. These patterns form during fetal development, somewhere between the 3rd and 8th month of gestation. The iris begins as simple tissue, then differentiates as the eye grows. Tiny random contractions in the developing eye create folds and variations. The collagen fibers align in response to mechanical tension. Pigment cells distribute unevenly, clustering in some areas, sparse in others. The result is a pattern that's determined partly by genetics and partly by chance, by the specific contingent circumstances of development in the womb. No two irises are identical, not even in identical twins who share the exact same DNA. Not even your left eye and your right eye match precisely. Each iris is as unique as a fingerprint, more unique actually. While fingerprints have about 40 distinguishing features, an iris has more than 200. This uniqueness has made irises valuable for biometric identification. Iris scanning is more accurate than any other biological measurement we have for confirming identity. The colors themselves range across an extraordinary spectrum. Brown eyes, where high concentrations of melanin in the stroma absorb most wavelengths of light. Blue eyes, where low melanin allows light to scatter, creating color the same way the sky is blue, through Rayleigh scattering. Green eyes with moderate melanin and a yellow pigment called lipochrome. Hazel eyes that seem to shift between colors depending on the light, gray, amber, violet in rare cases, and within each color category, infinite variation. The iris is always moving, always adjusting. In bright light, the sphincter muscle contracts, pulling the pupil smaller. In darkness, the dilator muscle relaxes, letting the pupil expand. This happens automatically, continuously, without conscious thought. The iris reads the light and responds, mediating between the world's brightness and your retina's sensitivity, protecting your vision, allowing you to see clearly across an enormous range of lighting conditions. And when someone looks at you, what they see first, before words are spoken, before any other communication happens, is your iris. The color and pattern of that colored ring. It's what we mean when we talk about eye color, when we describe someone as having blue eyes or brown eyes or green eyes. We're talking about the iris, about that thin layer of tissue whose name reaches back to a goddess who bridged heaven and earth. There's a moment after a rainstorm when the sun breaks through thinning clouds and the air is still full of moisture, when a rainbow appears. It starts faint, barely there, a suggestion of color against gray sky. Then it strengthens, becomes vivid, arcing from horizon to horizon. Red on the outer edge, violet on the inner, with orange, yellow, green, and blue between. A bridge of light. The ancient Greeks, seeing this, thought of Iris. They imagined her walking that arc, her golden wings folded, her feet sure on the colored path. They saw the rainbow as evidence of her passage, proof that messages were being carried, that connection between earth and heaven was maintained. The rainbow was not just a meteorological event, but a theophany, a showing forth of divine presence. And there is something divine about rainbows even now, even when we understand the physics. They're ephemeral, lasting only minutes before they fade. They can't be approached. Walk toward a rainbow and it recedes, always staying the same distance away. Their pure appearance having no substance, existing only as light bent through water. And yet they're real, visible to everyone, objectively there even though you can't touch them. The iris of the eye shares some of these qualities. It too is made of light and color. What you see when you look at someone's iris is not the iris itself, not exactly. It's light that has passed through the cornea, reflected off the iris structures, passed back out through the cornea to your eye. You're seeing the interaction of light with tissue, seeing color that exists because of how certain wavelengths are absorbed and others reflected. The iris's color is as much about light as it is about pigment. And like a rainbow, each iris is unique in its coloring. No two rainbows are identical because each depends on the specific distribution of water droplets in the air, the angle of the sun, the position of the observer. Change any of these variables and the rainbow changes. Similarly, no two irises share the exact same distribution of melanin, the exact same arrangement of collagen fibers, the exact same pattern of crypts and furrows. Each is a one-time phenomenon, a unique expression of light and structure. The comparison goes deeper. Both rainbows and irises are boundaries, borders between different states. A rainbow marks the edge between storm and clearing, between rain and sun, between cloud and blue sky. It appears in liminal space, in the transitional moment when weather changes. The iris marks the edge between outer world and inner self, between light arriving from outside and light interpreted within. It sits at the boundary, mediating, controlling what passes through, and both are beautiful in ways that invite contemplation. People stop to photograph rainbows, to point them out to children, to stand and watch until they fade. There's something in a rainbow that touches us, that makes us pause. The same is true of eyes. We're drawn to them. We look into them when we talk to people. We notice their color. We talk about eyes more than any other facial feature. Beautiful eyes, we say. Kind eyes. Eyes like the ocean. We see in eyes something more than just anatomy. Perhaps this is what the ancient Greeks intuited when they named both things for the same goddess. Perhaps they recognized that rainbows and irises share an essential quality. They are bridges made visible, connections between realms given form, proof that separate worlds can touch. There is something profound in the act of looking into someone's eyes, not glancing, not scanning their face quickly and moving on, but actually meeting their gaze, holding it, looking into the colored rings and seeing the person behind them. It's intimate in a way that other forms of looking are not. It creates connection. When you look into someone's eyes, your irises and theirs are collaborating. Light reflects off their iris, enters your pupil, is focused by your lens onto your retina. Your brain processes this information and you perceive their eye color, their iris pattern. And simultaneously, they're doing the same with you. Light is flowing both ways, creating a loop of seeing and being seen. The boundaries between you soften. For a moment, inner and outer worlds touch. This is what the eye does in every moment, of course. It connects you to the world outside your body. Light carries information from distant objects. The sun, 93 million miles away, a mountain on the horizon, a book in your hands. And your eyes receive that information, translate it into electrical signals, pass it to your brain for interpretation. You know the external world only through what your eyes report. They are your primary bridge to everything beyond your skin. But there's something special about eye contact with another person, something reciprocal and conscious. The person you're looking at is also a perceiving subject, also looking out from behind their eyes. When you meet their gaze, you're acknowledging this. You're recognizing them as another consciousness, another inner world. The look becomes a form of communication that doesn't require words. Ancient traditions recognize this. The evil eye belief, found in cultures around the world, held that a malevolent gaze could cause harm. Conversely, a blessing could be conferred through a look. Eye contact between lovers carried emotional weight. Refusing to meet someone's eyes was a slight, an insult, a withdrawal of recognition. How you used your gaze mattered socially, spiritually, morally. And there's research now suggesting that eye contact does have measurable effects. It synchronizes brain activity between people. It releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. It makes conversations more intimate and more memorable. When someone looks you in the eyes while speaking, you're more likely to trust them, to feel connected to them, to remember what they said. The gaze creates relationship. Perhaps this is the deepest meaning of naming the eye's colored ring after Iris, the messenger goddess. Perhaps what the name suggests is that every act of seeing, every exchange of glances, every moment of eye contact is itself a message being carried, a bridge being built. Your iris, that thin ring of colored tissue, is the visible part of this bridge. It's what someone sees when they look at you. It's the outward sign of your inward capacity for vision, for connection, for consciousness itself. In meditative traditions, there are practices that involve gazing. Zen students sit facing each other and simply look into each other's eyes for extended periods, not speaking, not breaking contact, just witnessing and being witnessed. Lovers sometimes do this naturally, looking into each other's eyes until everything else fades away. The practice is simple but powerful. Look, really look. Allow yourself to be looked at in return and notice what happens to your sense of boundary, of separation, of self. The iris facilitates this. By dilating and contracting, it ensures that the right amount of light enters your eye, that your vision remains clear, that you can continue to see the person you're looking at. Without this automatic adjustment, bright light would overwhelm your retina or dim light would leave you blind. The iris constantly mediates between you and the world, between inner need and outer condition, making vision possible. When you close your eyes to sleep, your irises relax. The muscles cease their constant small adjustments. The pattern remains. Those crypts and furrows, those pigmented rings, that unique signature that belongs to you alone, but it waits in darkness until morning, until you open your eyes again and light returns, until the bridge is rebuilt and you once more connect to the world outside. As you drift toward sleep tonight, perhaps you can carry this awareness with you, that your eyes are bridges, that the colored rings within them share their name with a goddess who connected heaven and earth, that every time you look at someone, truly look, you participate in an ancient act of crossing, of connection, of one consciousness reaching out to touch another. Sleep well, knowing that in the morning, when you open your eyes and light floods in through those rings of color, you'll be building bridges again, connecting inner and outer, carrying messages between the world and your soul. If you enjoyed this journey from mythology to sight, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Pillow Trace for more interesting stories to listen to before bedtime. May your dreams be vivid and your morning vision clear, blessed by the goddess who gave her name to your seeing.